This is going to be my attempt at a video I had requested a few times, which would just be a tutorial on that sort of Fats Domino style Boogie Woogie, which I played in a few videos. And I had a few requests for just sort of a tutorial on how to do that improvisation. So I think it's actually a little easier than it looks once you get that Boogie Woogie bass line down, which is just this. Right, so you've got 2 taps on your G. I'm going to be playing it in G. That was a pretty popular, key that Fats Domino tended to use, especially in Boogie Woogie. You have 2 taps on the G. So 2 taps. 1 on your B, back to the G, up to a D, back down to the G, E, D, and that repeats over and over, and then you move it into the key of C, and it would also be in the key of D here. So I'll show you that sort of Fats Domino chord progression. You'd have G, and then C, and then a G. You might have D there, and then C, and then G. So that is the quintessential Fats Domino movement there. It's that pendulum in between your bass note and these 2 notes. So if you were in G, you'd have a bass note, a high G, and a D. If you were in C, you'd have a C, and a G, and a C. And that's how he makes this riff. And that, I believe, is the most important Fats Domino riff. You hear it, he uses a lot. So it sounds really complicated very fast, but it's once you sort of slow it down, you have that, which is what I've just shown you. So after 2 of that, 1, 2, you have a C and an E. And then you mirror that first sound. So you have that. That's sort of your call. And that's your answer. And I like to add in that slide. And when you listen to what Fats Domino plays, he tends to play that. You could just go. But that wouldn't quite add in that sort of Boogie Woogie feel. And you can even add... You could add in a slide with that hand there. So once you have that, with that, there where you're using the B and the D, I do that 3 times, I guess. Once you have that down, you can sort of improvise from that a lot. So you have something like this. And that's a good position to move into this hand position. And that leads us to that very important, all-important riff that you will see used in any other tutorial. Almost any rock and roll pianist will use this. Biggest filler riff. I use it all the time. It's simply... So you start with your bass note, in this case G. A slide with your pointer finger to your B, and you just hit the D at the same time. Pendulum from the G to an E and a C. And you just repeat that. And then you sort of add it in with that Fats Domino. That was his big favorite riff, it seems. You know, that sort of... And it sort of combines this sound with this sound. So that's another very important Fats Domino style riff, this kind of thing. He used that quite a bit, and especially in Boogie Woogie we have a very call and response. So if you take a section like this, you'll notice a lot of it is just repeating the same thing over and over. So like this riff here, we have a G, so a G, there's a G, your higher G, and a C sharp or a D flat, and then just 2 hits when you go up to the a D with just this finger. So, and that's a really good sounding riff if you put it. And you can change it. So when you go down to the C, you could just leave it as that. So you could just do. But I like to change it. So instead of going, you go. And that's that Fats Domino riff that he used so much. You might recognize that from the start of the song Little Mama, for example. That's just a G, 1 hit of a D and a G on top, 1 hit of an E and a G on top, back to your first position, and just repeated. Another Fats Domino riff that he used a lot was this. I can't really do it totally because of my recording equipment, but it was this. Hit these 2 notes at the same time. And he used a lot of these trills, which at times, if you heard a song like Detroit City, which was one of his first recordings, you'll hear at times he almost just sounds like he's just choosing random notes. You'll just... And that just adds a lot. And you can do it in the Boogie Woogie where you just choose 5 random notes, and you can either go... So you can go up with them, you can go down with them, or you can go... And you don't want to overuse that, but at times he used it and was like this creative little accent. He didn't always use it in Boogie Woogie, but when I play, I like to add that kind of thing in, where you're just using just random notes. And, you know, my sort of Boogie Woogie guilt is at times when I don't feel, and especially if it's like a real rocker of a song, I just like to mash the keys. Just... And I don't recommend that as a good habit, but, you know, it's Boogie Woogie, you know? Whatever you do on your right hand tends to be pretty good as long as it's filler. So you have this kind of thing. And that's where Fats Domino really got into a lot of sort of syncopation, so almost a jazzy sound, where instead of having this, which is very square, there's a good one. Very Fats Domino sounding riff. A pinky and a middle finger on your D and a B flat. And you'll notice that is almost similar to in your Fats Domino's Fat Man. So that's a very big Fats Domino riff. No matter what chord you're in, that rundown, and that's in all Boogie Woogie. That rundown of your sharp and to, you know, you can use it in pretty much any chord. It's your bass note, 1 note up from the bass note, and a semitone up from that note. So, and I like to add in that note. And that's a really good thing to add in. At times, Fats Domino used very, very simple riffs that ended up sounding good. So I'm pretty bad at this one, but can see I messed it up a little bit there, but that's literally just going down the scale 2 notes at a time. But in a lot of songs, it sounded really good. That's probably the most important Boogie Woogie riff. Whether it's Fats Domino, whether it's Jerry Lee Lewis, whether it's Little Richard, Professor Longhair, anyone you're listening to, any Boogie Woogie style rock and roll pianist, if you're listening to Ray Charles, they always do something along these lines. Nearly every song, you're gonna hear that. That's the Fats Domino. That's very similar to the Fats Domino. It's just those triplets. And that's the quintessential Fats Domino triplet there, is this one. Pinky and your middle finger, and you use it for your D and your G, and you do like almost as if you're playing this one. A lot of this music is based off of the interaction between a sliding note. Right? So if you were to do this one, and then you have your trills. So a trill is something I like to use a lot, and I've used a lot, especially when I was sort of learning this type of music and beginning to play it. If you were to just use a trill, it actually can sound good on its own, and you'll find Fats Domino use that in a lot of the songs where he maybe either thought it sounded better or thought it would simply be easier to play. So you'll hear a song sometimes where you just have this in the background. And then you can add in trills to things like this. That's another important piece there, which is that syncopation part of Fats Domino music, like I was talking about earlier. So you have there, it's really about the muscle memory of this hand. And no real beginner will ever be able to play this. Because if you're new to Boogie Woogie music, it's about getting this hand to be self-sufficient. That's how you end up doing things like this. That's just, you have a B flat and a D flat, and I'm sliding it up to the naturals of those notes. And of course, always using this note as a pendulum. But if you don't have this left hand automatically moving, you're going to end up getting something like this. You know, you're going to start trying to, you're going to try to add them together, right? So when you're starting out with this kind of music, it's really best to practice things like, and those trills are one of the most important things by far. And sorry, those third notes, I mean those triplets, there's the word there. And you can have them at different speeds, so you can have, what you notice is pretty much every time my left hand hits the piano, my right hand does. Or you can have a double time triplet, which is, and that's another very important Fats Domino riff there. That kind of thing where you just, and he used this so if you were to do it in G, you'd have, that's just a B flat, a B, and 2 hits of that. And that can also lead into the Fats Frenzy intro, which is one of his, at least one of my favorite pieces of his, which is just a purely instrumental boogie woogie. And it sort of starts off with this sort of crazy thing. I could never play it quite as well. And it's just got this sort of... And that's that. So that's really combining a lot of those ideas. So you're starting with your G, pointer finger. I like to use my pointer finger for those both notes. And I like to use the same 2 fingers that play this, your D and your G, to play your E and your A. And I don't even want to play it too much in this tutorial because that's a really, really hard riff. Even though it's actually one of the more simpler looking ones, I'm going to screw it up, you know? And it's all that repetition. So even something like this. That's a riff I've used it for. You don't need to be afraid in this kind of music of 2 things. Mistakes and not really lining up with the bass line. So if I have trouble with this, but if you can keep your left hand moving at the same beat, you can add really syncopated things on the right hand or things that don't even match. And you can do something like this. And I'll show you where that doesn't match. So that's a sort of I'm going up. And it doesn't quite match the left hand because it's starting in different spots. Because this is sort of 3, and this is not. This is moving in maybe 4th. So. But if I were to do this, so using that same idea of a D, a B flat, then a D and a B natural, and a C and an E. But instead I were to do this, it would be a lot more difficult to keep that in line. And if I were to do... you'll see I actually lost my own pace there. But if you can keep it, you can use things that aren't even really in any time signature, you know? That's another good example of something that doesn't really hold when you hear it a nice time signature. That's sort of, so when you hear that Fats Domino trill, he sometimes does this, which is your thumb on an A, a trill, or sorry, a slide up, a slur, I think is the word, between a B flat and a B, and then up to your D. And that's the last hand position I wanted to make sure I showed, which is this. And that's sort of another way of playing this. And that's a way that can open your hands up to a lot of different ways of doing things. So if I'm doing this, now when I'm in this position, I have the option to go up very easily. But it's a lot harder for me to now go, right? But when I'm in this position, I have a very easy option to go both up and use the bottom end of the scale. There's another thing I use a lot of. And that's almost a very Jerry Lee Lewis thing. So if you have just going down in this sequence. So you have these three, which is the top three notes of your scale, and you're adding in this, and then you're harmonizing it. And that's where you get this very Fats Domino riff here. So, to sort of end this off, you know, I'll show you that, which is a personal favorite riff of mine. That kind of thing. So you're going to use your middle finger to slide what used to be, if you play it like me, you would have been using your pointer finger before. Now your thumb's down here, and your pointer finger is going to be on this note. And that adds that nice harmony in the bottom. So you're having a trill. So I'll just sort of finish it off by showing you just a little bit of sort of a slowed down bit of Boogie Woogie. So I'll try and do it. Never be afraid to mess around with the bass line a little bit. As with most of this Boogie Woogie, you never want to be too dependent on this. I'm very dependent on that, especially when I don't know how I'm going to transition from two things. You know, if I don't want to try and do something. I tend to do that. And that sounds very good, but you try not to overuse it. But the most importantly, it's just to have fun with it. Fats Domino's Boogie Woogie was really some of the most joyous music that you ever heard. When I play it, I sometimes like to imagine that sort of Fats Domino band backing. So in some of his songs, you had this kind of thing in the back of his Boogie Woogie. You know, that classic Boogie Woogie chord handing. But you'd have a guitar doing that. So if you think of it in the back of your head, you can sort of make it almost swing more. Ba-ba-da, ba-ba-da.